Thank you all for being here, firstly. I think it's really extraordinary to see this many people packed into a very stuffy and small room to discuss this issue of genocide. And I would like to say that I find it quite extraordinary as a Jewish person, the son of a survivor of genocide, to be finding myself repeatedly now being called upon to speak about genocide in this context. The allegation being that my people and the Jewish people and the Jewish state are guilty of this crime of crimes. I find it absolutely extraordinary that this is the allegation levelled against us, and that the pinnacle of my journalistic activity in my life so far has come to this, that I am being called upon repeatedly to prove that we are not genocidal. But if that's what we have to do, that is what we are going to do. Now, we've spoken a bit, Natasha mentioned the origin of the word genocide. It's a very complex term because it's not just a legal concept, it's a societal concept, it's an ethical concept, it's a moral concept. And it's a very important concept. And I would go on to build on what both previous speakers have said and say that the use of this word against us, the Jewish people, in response to what is happening, is not just outrageous for us, it is outrageous against all the genuine and real genocides that have occurred in our history. Because this word was coined by Lemkin in 1944 because he was staggered that there was a crime that could be unpunished. The reason he invented this term, genocide, was that if I go out and kill one person, I would probably be punished and imprisoned for it. But if I went out and killed an entire people, or tried to, the tendency was that despite that being the most horrific thing people could do to one another, the orchestrators of those acts very rarely found themselves punished for it. The individuals who carried out the acts, even at the bottom of the chain of command, often went completely unpunished after the genocides of history. And this is why he wanted to create this concept of a crime that could be categorized, described, studied, and punished. I think that's vitally important. And so what I want to say, to look a bit more at this allegation of genocide. I mean, I'm not stupid. The reason we're in here in this room discussing whether the word genocide means what we think it means and whether we should use it, it's entirely because of what's happening in Gaza. That is the reason this room is packed today. That is why we are being called on to talk about this subject. What's happening in Gaza may be horrible. It may involve some war crimes on the part of the Israeli forces. It may not. But many wars, in fact, I would say all wars, are horrific and ugly and involve horrible humanitarian situations and very often involve individual moments of war crimes. None of those things implies genocide. None. Genocide has, whether legally or morally, some very specific requirements. And among those that I think are obviously not present here and are obviously the things that were present in the real genocides that we study and academics study the world over are a few important factors. And that's what I want to focus on now, because I think that they are vital in their horror and the obviousness of their absolute absence in Gaza. And I will then go on just to say a few words about the media as a journalist and the part that the media plays in perpetuating this grotesque blood libel against Jewish people, this grotesque allegation that we are carrying out genocide. And the media plays an important and absolutely dreadful part in spreading this calumny about us around the world. So what are those things that are not present in a genocide other than intention, which we've heard about? There have to be certain other features, or there usually are certain other features. And genocide studies is an interesting field because it's not just history and it's not just law. It's actually a study that covers many different disciplines. For example, it covers law and it covers ethics and it covers psychology. We ask ourselves, how could individuals carry out acts of genocide? Usually the people that are interviewed by genocide academics could be very ordinary people who took it upon themselves to hideously bludgeon to death people who had previously been their neighbours, people who would pick up a child or a baby and swing it against a wall to smash its head against the wall, as happened in Rwanda or as happened during the Nazi Holocaust. These are the genuine crimes of Holocaust that we see again and again, perpetrated again and again, because of a motivation of trying to achieve a sense of purity, a sense of utopia. These are the things that are common to the historic genocides that we can look back to over the last century and a bit. And I will elaborate a little bit on those now. If you think back to other genocides that we can all agree are genocides, they would talk, for example, about the purity of society, the purity of humanity, and the need to eradicate people who did not comply genetically with the level of purity that society was aspiring to. These are the sorts of things the Nazis spoke of. When my father, as a child in Italy, was banned by the racial laws from going to the beach at the same times as other people or being present in public at the same times as other people, these were acts of genocide or part of that genocide. When my father was hidden by nuns, first in a convent and then for 9 months in a Catholic orphanage in Italy, this was because he was being hidden from people who wished to deport him and all people like him to the death camps. This is what we look at when we look at genocide. What we're seeing in Gaza is a response to a genocidal attack on Jews, people who stormed through a fence, who went and raped and pillaged and killed and kidnapped Jews and others because they were in Israel. They are the people who had visions of purity in society. They are the people who, as we've heard, phoned home to tell mum they'd slaughtered 10 Jews with their own hands. I interviewed a survivor from one of the kibbutzim just a couple of weeks ago who told me as she hid in her panic room, which was not a panic room, a bomb shelter, which she had devised a lock for using bits and pieces she found in the room, she heard them coming in and out of her house multiple times. And when she eventually was freed from that room by the army in the end, she found that they had stolen her kitchen appliances, that they had stolen her television, they had stolen all of the cars from the kibbutz, they had stolen everything they could. They weren't even Hamas people who had done that. They were tourists. The fence was down, and Gazan people who have nothing to do with Hamas or as Palestinian Islamic Jihad waltzed in, and while people were hiding or dying in their own homes, they robbed them. If there's a genocide that went on October the 7th, it was there, because that is a society which has been brainwashed into a belief that the people on the other side of the fence do not deserve the basic values of humanity. The genocide happened the other way round from what the BBC or most of the media will tell you. So warped is the media's representation of this that if you happen to have followed, it's a strange hobby I know, the BBC's peculiar mistakes and apologies on Israel, got to do something for fun, you will see. For example, I don't know how many of you saw, there was one report, other than for example, Jeremy Bowen claimed they'd flattened the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza. And of course, when that was proven not to be true, they were almost disappointed. The BBC will never forgive Israel for not flattening a hospital full of children. The BBC will never forgive Israel for not having gone into a hospital, the Al-Shifa hospital, and targeted medics and Arabic speakers. As their newsreader read out, she said they had specifically gone in and targeted those people. That probably would have been a qualifying act of genocide. In actual fact, the correction she was forced to make was that they had sent Arabic speakers and medics to assist the people in the hospital who weren't terrorists. Quite a difference. But why is it important? It's important because if any of you in this room or outside this room believe that Israel is genocidal, it's no wonder. Because the term was coined so that we could defend against this happening again in our lifetimes. And so when we see signals that it might be, it's completely reasonable that we would want to investigate and interrogate what's happening. And when we try to do so, we are met with a wall of what we today call disinformation, a wall of what I prefer to call lies. about Israel, about Jews, and about what's going on. It's really pretty simple. It's not a genocide when you start to lose a war you started. That is not a genocide. It could be turned into a genocide if there was any indication that Israel was carrying out the acts required, that it was dreaming of a utopian society free of Arabs. But of course, Israel has a massive Arab minority in the country with full equal rights, who have taken some of the most senior roles in the country. That is a nonsense. Israel's act is not one of racial purity or trying to wipe out any single people. It is one of trying to defend itself against a genocidal people who launched an attack on its own people and who have said they would do it over and over again. Israel is fighting against extremist Islamic terrorism, which has indoctrinated many of its enemies to believe that Jews do not deserve their own country, do not deserve a state, not even alongside a Palestinian state, do not deserve a place in the Middle East. And I would say that the sooner that the media starts to represent this a bit more fairly, society will start to understand that they're being lied to, and people will understand that this is a fight that's not just happening in the Middle East, it's happening around the whole world, including right here in our city and in our country. And I would say, just to tie up, and there's plenty more to discuss, that as soon as we can realize that, we can truly target those who are truly and really genocidal, because they have all of